They laughed when you went silent. Not loud laughter, the kind that hides behind whispers, behind smirks, behind those side glances that say, "They're finished." Because in a world addicted to noise, silence looks like weakness. No announcements, no explanations, no desperate need to be seen, just absence. And people fear what they can't read. While they were busy performing, proving, begging for validation, you disappeared into the background, not to quit, not to break, but to build, quietly, carefully, almost invisibly. See, silence does something dangerous. It forces you to face yourself, no applause, no distractions, just truth. And most people can't survive that. But you did. You let them misunderstand you. You let them underestimate you. You let them believe the story that made them comfortable, while you were rewriting yours in the dark. Because real power doesn't announce its arrival. It studies, it adapts. It waits. Silence is never what people think it is. Most people hear quiet and assume defeat. They mistake stillness for surrender, absence for weakness, and restraint for fear. That is because they have been trained by a world that worships noise. Everywhere you look, people are announcing themselves, displaying every move, every opinion, every ambition as if volume alone can create value. They speak before they think, react before they understand, and expose their plans before those plans have the strength to survive. In that kind of world, the one who chooses silence becomes something unsettling. Silence is not emptiness. Silence is control. When you stay quiet, you deny people access to your mind. They cannot measure your intentions, predict your next move, or decide where you are vulnerable. The moment people stop being able to read you, they begin to invent stories about you. They tell themselves you are lost, broken, afraid, or finished because that story comforts them. It allows them to feel safe. It allows them to believe they are ahead. And that is where the advantage begins. The loudest people are often the easiest to defeat because they reveal themselves without realizing it. Their words become maps. Their emotions become open doors. Their desperation to be seen turns into weakness. But the quiet person offers nothing to attack. No explanation, no emotional reaction, no unnecessary defense, just composure. That kind of silence creates pressure. People begin to wonder what you know that they do not. They start watching you more closely. Every small move you make suddenly feels significant because it is rare. Every action carries weight because it is not buried beneath endless words. Silence turns presence into mystery, and mystery has power. But the real strength of silence is not what it does to others. It is what it does to you. When you stop announcing your struggles, your goals, and your every thought, you begin to build something far more dangerous. Discipline. Silence forces you to rely on yourself instead of applause. There is no instant validation, no quick approval, no comforting reaction from the crowd. It becomes just you and the work. That is where transformation happens. In silence, excuses sound louder, doubt sounds louder, fear sounds louder. You hear every weakness in your own mind because there is nothing left to distract you from it. Most people run from that moment. They fill the air with noise because they cannot stand the sound of their own thoughts. But if you remain there long enough, something changes. The fear stops controlling you. The noise inside your head begins to organize itself. Pain becomes clarity. Rejection becomes fuel. Failure becomes instruction. What once felt like loneliness starts becoming focus. Silence strips away illusions until all that remains is truth, and truth is where strength is born. This is why silence is strategy. It allows you to observe while others expose themselves. It gives you space to think while others rush into mistakes. It protects your energy from people who feed on your reactions. It keeps your vision untouched by outside doubt. While others are busy proving themselves to the world, you are busy becoming something the world will eventually be forced to recognize. People often think power comes from dominance, from speaking over others, from being the most visible person in the room. But real power often enters quietly. It studies the room before it moves. It listens more than it speaks. It understands people before people understand it. That is why the ones who laugh at your silence rarely see what is coming. They assume you are doing nothing because they cannot witness the process. They do not see the discipline being built in private, the mindset sharpening in the dark, the patience growing stronger with every moment you refuse to react. And by the time they finally understand what your silence really meant, the distance between where they are and where you have become already too wide to cross. Because silence was never weakness. It was the place where power learned how to breathe. Underestimation is a strange kind of gift. Most people spend their lives trying to be seen, trying to be acknowledged, trying to convince others of their worth. They chase approval like it's oxygen, as if without recognition they'll disappear. But when people underestimate you, something shifts. You're no longer being watched closely. You're no longer being analyzed with caution. You become background noise in their world, and that's where the advantage begins. Because people don't guard themselves against what they don't respect. When they underestimate you, they relax. They stop preparing for you. They stop questioning you. Their attention drifts elsewhere, toward louder threats, toward more obvious competition. And while they're distracted, they unknowingly lower their defenses. They reveal habits, weaknesses, patterns. They speak freely around you. They move carelessly. They assume you won't notice, won't understand, won't matter. That assumption becomes your cover. Most people can't tolerate being underestimated. It irritates them. It bruises their ego. They rush to correct it, to prove something, to show the world that they are more capable than they appear. They react emotionally, and in doing so, they expose everything they should have protected. They trade long-term advantage for short-term validation. But the one who understands the game doesn't react. They let the underestimation settle. They let people believe whatever story makes them comfortable. Weak, slow, lost, unimportant. They wear those labels like a disguise, not because they accept them, but because they know how useful they are. The less people expect from you, the more space you have to move without resistance. There is a certain freedom in being overlooked. No pressure to perform on command. No constant scrutiny. No expectations forcing you into a predictable path. You're allowed to experiment, to fail quietly, to learn without an audience waiting to judge you. While others are trapped in the image they've created, you remain undefined, and being undefined makes you dangerous. Because you can become anything. When people think they understand you, they stop paying attention. They place you in a category and move on. But when their perception of you is wrong, every decision they make around you is built on a flawed assumption. They respond to a version of you that doesn't exist, and that gap between perception and reality becomes your leverage. You don't need to announce that you're capable. You don't need to interrupt their narrative. In fact, it's better if you don't. Let them believe you lack discipline while you build it in silence. Let them believe you lack vision while you refine it in private. Let them believe you're stuck while you're actually preparing to move. Because the moment you correct them, you lose the advantage. Underestimation also sharpens something inside you. It removes the comfort of being praised and replaces it with the pressure of proving something to yourself instead of others. You stop performing for approval and start working for results. Your focus becomes internal. Your standards become higher because they're no longer shaped by outside opinions. And that kind of focus changes how you operate. You begin to see time differently. You stop wasting energy on explaining your journey. You invest it into becoming better. You stop reacting to every slight or doubt. You let them pass through you without resistance. Every ignored insult, every dismissed assumption becomes fuel, not for anger, but for precision. You move quieter. You think deeper. You act with intention instead of impulse. And slowly, without announcement, without warning, the gap between who they think you are and who you've become starts to widen. At first, they don't notice. Then they sense something is off. The small changes become harder to ignore. The results begin to speak in ways your silence never did. And confusion sets in because the version of you they believed in no longer matches reality. They try to reassess. They try to understand when the shift happened. But they're already too late, because while they were comfortable in their assumptions, you were building in their blind spot. And by the time they realize they misjudged you, they're no longer dealing with the person they underestimated. They're dealing with the consequence of it. There's something almost addictive about being seen. The attention, the reactions, the quick validation that tells you you're doing something right. Most people don't build for progress. They perform for approval. Every move is documented, every step announced, every small win displayed like it needs an audience to become real. It looks like growth from the outside, but it's fragile, because the moment the attention fades, so does the motivation. Building in the dark is different. It has no audience, no applause, no reassurance that you're on the right path. Just effort, repetition, and long stretches where nothing seems to change. It forces you to confront a question most people avoid. Would you still do the work if no one ever noticed? Because in the dark, no one is watching you fail. There's no pressure to impress, no need to protect an image. You can make mistakes without turning them into public weaknesses. You can try, adjust, fail again, and refine without the weight of judgment slowing you down. While others are busy maintaining appearances, you're focused on actual progress. And progress doesn't need to look good, it just needs to be real. The ones who perform are constantly reacting. They chase trends, adapt to what gets attention, shape themselves based on what others want to see. Their direction isn't controlled by purpose, it's controlled by response. And response is unstable. It changes with moods, opinions, and expectations. So they stay stuck in a cycle of proving instead of improving. But when you build in the dark, your direction becomes internal. You're not adjusting for applause. You're adjusting for effectiveness. You're not asking what looks impressive. You're asking what actually works. That shift changes everything. Your standards get higher because they're not influenced by external noise. You become harder on yourself in the right ways, more focused, more precise, and the work becomes deeper. There's a level of repetition most people will never reach because it's invisible. Doing something once is easy when people are watching. Doing it 100 times without recognition requires something else entirely. Discipline grows in those moments. Skill sharpens in those repetitions. And confidence starts to come from competence, not compliments. In the dark, there are no shortcuts. No illusion of progress created by attention. You either improve or you stay the same. There's no audience to convince otherwise. That honesty is uncomfortable, but it's also powerful. It forces you to face reality without filters, to measure yourself based on results, not reactions. And while you're doing that, something else is happening. You're separating yourself from the noise. The world becomes quieter when you stop trying to be heard. Distractions lose their grip. Comparisons start to fade. You're no longer measuring your pace against people who are moving for different reasons. Your focus narrows. Your energy becomes concentrated instead of scattered. That concentration creates momentum. It's not loud. It doesn't attract attention, but it builds slowly, consistently, almost unnoticed, until one day the results surface. And that's when everything shifts, because people only see the outcome. They don't see the hours, the failures, the adjustments, the discipline it took to get there. To them, it looks sudden, unexpected, as if it happened overnight. But what they're really seeing is the accumulation of everything that was built in silence. That's the difference between performing and building. One is designed to be seen. The other is designed to last. Performers burn out when the attention disappears because they were never attached to the work itself. Builders keep going because the work is the point. They don't need to show it to feel it. They don't need recognition to justify it. And when the time comes, when the results are too real to ignore, the same people who were chasing attention are forced to pay it to you. Not because you asked for it, but because what was built in the dark can no longer stay hidden. Most people think power looks aggressive. Loud voices, quick reactions, visible dominance. They assume the one who speaks the most, reacts the fastest, and pushes the hardest is the one in control. But if you watch closely, those reactions are rarely controlled. They're impulsive, emotional, predictable, and anything predictable can be manipulated. Self-control doesn't look impressive at first. It's quiet, almost invisible. It doesn't demand attention, doesn't try to prove anything in the moment. But it's the difference between reacting and deciding. And that difference changes everything. When you don't control yourself, everything else controls you. A comment can shift your mood. A setback can break your focus. Someone else's opinion can alter your direction. You become easy to influence because your state depends on what happens around you. People don't even need to attack you directly. They just need to trigger you, and you'll do the rest for them. That's how control is lost. It doesn't happen in big dramatic moments. It happens in small, repeated reactions. The unnecessary argument, the emotional response, the need to prove something immediately. Each one gives away a piece of your focus, your energy, your direction. And over time, those pieces add up until you're no longer moving intentionally. You're just reacting to whatever comes your way. Self-control interrupts that pattern. It creates a gap between what happens and how you respond. In that gap, you get to choose. Not based on emotion, not based on impulse, but based on purpose. Most people never develop that space. They move from stimulus to reaction without thinking, like it's automatic. But it doesn't have to be. That pause is where power lives. Because when you can control your response, you become unpredictable in a different way. Not chaotic, but deliberate. People can't pull you into situations you don't choose. They can't provoke you into mistakes you didn't decide to make. They can't read you through your reactions, because your reactions are no longer automatic. You start to move with intention. Anger doesn't disappear, but it stops controlling your actions. Pressure doesn't vanish, but it stops dictating your decisions. Fear doesn't go away, but it loses its authority. You feel everything, but you're not ruled by it. And that changes how you operate in every situation. Most people confuse expression with strength. They think showing every emotion proves authenticity, but unfiltered expression is often just lack of discipline. Real strength is being able to feel something deeply and still choose how, when, or if you express it. That restraint is misunderstood. People might think you don't care. They might assume you're unaffected, distant, or cold. But what they're actually seeing is control. You're not reacting because you've decided not to, not because you're incapable. And that decision keeps your focus intact. Focus is everything. Without it, your efforts scatter. Your energy leaks into distractions, conflicts, unnecessary explanations. With it, your actions align. Every move has a reason. Every response has a purpose. You stop wasting time on things that don't move you forward, because you're no longer pulled in every direction by external noise. Self-control also protects your progress. When you're building something, whether it's skill, discipline, or direction, the biggest threat isn't always failure. It's distraction. It's reacting to things that don't matter. It's losing consistency because something temporary caught your attention. The ability to stay steady, to keep moving regardless of what's happening around you, is what separates intention from outcome, and steadiness comes from control. You don't speed up because of excitement. You don't slow down because of doubt. You maintain pace because you've chosen it. That consistency compounds over time. Small actions, repeated without interruption, start to create results that look disproportionate to the effort behind them. People notice those results, but they rarely understand where they came from. They see the outcome, not the restraint. The progress, not the discipline behind it. They don't see the moments you chose silence over reaction, focus over distraction, patience over impulse. But those moments are the foundation, because the one who controls themselves doesn't need to control everything else. They only need to decide how they respond, and that decision shapes everything that follows. There's a quiet addiction most people never question. The need to be seen, approved, validated. It hides behind confidence, disguises itself as sharing, but underneath it all is a dependence, a subtle reliance on other people to confirm that what you're doing matters. Without that confirmation, doubt creeps in. Without that reaction, motivation fades. So they move loudly. They announce their goals before they've even started. They explain their plans in detail, as if speaking them out loud somehow makes them real. They look for reactions, for approval, for that small hit of encouragement that keeps them going. And when the response is strong, they feel powerful. When it's not, they feel lost. That's not strength. That's dependency. When you move without seeking validation, everything changes. Your actions stop being performances and start becoming decisions. You're no longer asking, will they approve of this? You're asking, does this move me forward? That shift is subtle, but it separates intention from influence, because validation distorts judgment. When you depend on it, you begin to adjust your behavior to receive it. You choose what looks impressive over what is effective. You prioritize visibility over progress. You shape your path based on what others will respond to, not what actually works. And over time, you drift further away from your own direction without realizing it. Moving without validation removes that distortion. You're free to make decisions that don't make sense to anyone else. You can take paths that look slow, boring, or unconventional without feeling the need to justify them. You're not tied to immediate results or external reactions. You're tied to process, and process is where real growth happens. It also changes how you handle silence. Most people fear being unnoticed. It makes them question their value. It makes them feel like they're falling behind. So they fill that silence with noise, with updates, with explanations, anything to remind the world that they exist. But when you don't seek validation, silence stops being threatening. It becomes normal. You don't need constant feedback to keep going. You don't need reassurance to stay consistent. You trust your direction enough to continue without interruption. And that trust builds something stronger than motivation. It builds discipline. Discipline doesn't rely on how you feel. It doesn't depend on who's watching. It doesn't fluctuate with attention. It's steady. It's consistent. And it grows when you stop outsourcing your confidence to other people. There's also a kind of protection in moving this way. When you don't broadcast your plans, you don't invite unnecessary opinions. You don't give people the chance to doubt you, discourage you, or project their limitations onto you. Your ideas stay untouched while they're still developing. Your focus remains intact because it's not being pulled in multiple directions by external voices. You protect your energy, and energy is limited. Every time you explain yourself, defend your decisions, or respond to opinions that don't matter, you spend it. Small amounts at first, but it adds up. And that loss of energy slows you down more than you realize. When you stop seeking validation, you eliminate those leaks. Your energy stays directed toward what you're building. You also become harder to read. When people don't know what you're working on, they can't anticipate your moves. When they don't see your progress in real time, they can't measure how far you've come. You move without pressure, without expectations, without interference. And that freedom allows you to operate at a different level, a quieter level, where your focus is deeper. Your actions are more deliberate. Your progress is less visible but more real. You're not chasing reactions. You're creating results. And results don't need validation to exist. They speak on their own. When the time is right, not because you needed approval, but because you never depended on it. Most people talk too early. They announce intentions like they're achievements, as if saying something out loud gives it weight. It feels productive in the moment. It creates the illusion of progress. People nod, react, sometimes even admire the idea. And for a brief second, it feels like you've already moved forward. But nothing has actually happened. Intentions are easy to share because they cost nothing. No discipline required, no consistency tested, no resistance faced. Just words, and words are comfortable. They let you stay in a space where everything is still possible, where failure hasn't had a chance to show up yet. That's why so many people stay there. They build identities around what they plan to do instead of what they've done. They repeat their goals so often that it starts to feel like reality. But when it comes time to act, the gap between intention and execution becomes visible. And most people don't know how to cross it, because talking doesn't prepare you for doing. In fact, it often does the opposite. The more you speak about something, the less urgency you feel to actually complete it. Your mind registers the conversation as progress. You get a small sense of satisfaction without earning it. And that satisfaction reduces the pressure to act. So you delay. You explain more. You plan more. You adjust your words instead of your actions. And slowly, the energy that should have gone into execution gets spent on expression. What could have become real stays stuck as potential. Results don't work like that. They don't respond to intention. They don't care about your plans, your ideas, or your explanations. They respond to repetition, to effort, to consistency. They require you to show up when it's inconvenient, to continue when it's uncomfortable, to push when there's no immediate reward. And none of that needs to be announced. In fact, announcing it weakens it. It exposes something that hasn't been built yet. It invites opinions into a process that's still fragile. People start reacting to something that doesn't exist, and those reactions can influence you more than they should. Doubt creeps in, pressure builds, expectations form, all before you've even started. Keeping your intentions to yourself removes that interference. It keeps the process clean. Your focus stays on execution instead of explanation. You're not dividing your attention between doing the work and talking about the work. Everything is directed toward one thing: progress, and progress compounds quietly. It doesn't need recognition to grow. It doesn't require validation to continue. It builds in small, consistent layers, day after day, action after action. Most of it invisible, most of it unnoticed, until eventually it reaches a point where it can't stay hidden anymore. That's when results appear. And results have a different kind of weight. They don't need to be explained. They don't rely on belief. They don't ask for approval. They exist, and because they exist, they speak. Not loudly, not dramatically, but with certainty. People notice them because they're real. There's no argument against something that's already been done. No debate over potential, no speculation about capability. The outcome answers every question that words once tried to address. and it does it without effort. That's the difference. Intentions invite conversation. Results end it. When you move this way, your identity shifts. You're no longer someone who talks about what could happen. You become someone who produces what did happen. Your confidence stops coming from ideas and starts coming from evidence, and evidence is difficult to ignore. It changes how people see you. Not because you told them to, but because they're forced to adjust their perception based on what's in front of them. The same people who overlooked your plans now have to acknowledge your outcomes. The same voices that once questioned you have nothing to question anymore, because there's nothing left to explain. Everything that needed to be said has already been shown, not through words, but through what you chose to build instead of talk about.